P Diddy, The Floodgates Open, Part 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Previously, I've analysed why P Diddy is a narcissist. His behaviour is such that he has created a body of evidence which is now coming to light in relation to the mistreatment and abuse of various people. As yet, there have been no convictions, but the body of evidence is substantial, and the number of people that have come forward alleging that they have been abused by P Diddy and people associated with him is significant. The floodgates have opened, and this provides me with an opportunity to explain to you various aspects of P Diddy's behaviour and those who were affected by his behaviour. Not just the victims, but other people who would be complicit in acting on his behalf in a way which was abusive, in covering up what had taken place. An interview took place just recently, hosted by Nancy Grace, and she was having an interview with various guests, psychologists, law enforcement, etc., to discuss the press conference that I've mentioned in an earlier video around the press conference that was held by Busby Law Firm regarding the various claims against Sean Combs, aka P Diddy. The interview, the discussion, starts by making mention of the law firm that's representing many victims. And there's reference made to two minors who were apparently under the age of 9 at the time of the crimes that were committed against them. Reference is also made in the press conference by the law firm to the fact that the lawyer had mentioned various celebrities who are household names who have not been named at this point. The host makes mention of Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Oprah Winfrey, Barack Obama, Ashton Kutcher, who have all been seen attending the parties. Naturally, it's stated that mere attendance doesn't mean that they are guilty by default, but this does mean that questions are being asked. The host speaks first of all to Lynn Shaw, who is the founder and executive director of something called Lynn's Warriors. Lynn explains that the rumours have persisted for years in relation to P Diddy's behaviour. This is quite common when it comes to the narcissist, that the narcissist will have a reputation. It might be on a minor scale, for instance, that somebody has a reputation for being a bit of a womanizer in the office environment, or that somebody has a reputation for being a hothead, that somebody has a reputation for being handsy, so you might just want to keep your distance from them. But nothing is actually done about the individual concerned. This tends to be a combination of the absence of credible evidence, the reluctance of victims to speak out, for instance, frightened of losing their job, frightened of repercussions from the perpetrator, frightened of just causing a scene, not wanting to engage in some form of confrontation. Remember, many victims are selected quite simply that because they make excellent victims, that the narcissist is able to, for want of a better description, sniff out that the individual is someone who is going to be susceptible to the manipulations. I've explained in a separate video how my kind have the ability to gauge who would make a useful victim. Here, victims also don't want to speak out because they fear they might not be believed, that they're concerned that it might stifle their promotion prospects, that it might cause trouble within a family environment. There's lots of reasons why the victim would not speak out, and thus the rumours about the behaviour of this narcissist continue to persist, but no action is actually taken. And this appears to be the case with P Diddy. The rumours about his parties and what went on there and what he has done have gone on, but nobody did anything about it. Alex West then speaks, who is an investigative entertainment reporter. And Alex is asked if she has seen the video of Ashton Kutcher on some type of swing going over a pool at one of Sean Combs's white parties. Apparently, this is still being investigated, and also mention is made of Justin Bieber, who was in P Diddy's protective custody. Nobody actually knows what happened to Bieber, as he isn't saying anything at the current time. But apart from Bieber, there were other minors that P Diddy did mentor. Now, this mentoring, of course, would make it seem like he was helping them. But of course, the mentoring was simply a way to get to these victims, to provide so-called legitimacy of interaction between him and these victims. Oh, I'm mentoring them. That's why I'm spending a lot of time with them. I'm a wealthy, powerful individual that can make a difference to their careers. And of course, as has often been seen in the world of sport, in the world of entertainment, in the world of politics, those who have very little bargaining power, those who want to become a professional footballer, want to become a successful gymnast, want to become a pop star, want to make it in the world of politics, find themselves falling under the spell of a more powerful, often charismatic individual. And that individual puts themselves in a position of power. They put themselves in a position whereby they are able to offer the world to that individual. And, of course, a condition of entry to that world is that they essentially do what that powerful individual wants them to do. And the difficulty with that is that it then results in the individual being abused, and they almost essentially see it as something that they just have to go along with in order to get to where they want to be. And therefore, similarly, those who have purportedly been abused by P Diddy, who were young, who were being mentored by him, undoubtedly will have gone along with it, not because they wanted it or liked it, but they recognised that it was just something that had to be put up with in order for them to try and become a celebrity. Reference is made to part of the press conference, and a clip was played with the lawyer saying that it was the biggest secret in the entertainment industry, in that it wasn't a secret at all. Dr. Leslie Dobson, a forensic psychologist, comments on the wall of silence now coming down. She explains that there's a lot of shame and fear involved in coming forward, which of course the narcissist relies upon as a means of keeping people quiet and thus nullifying that threat to control. She explains there are also threats of death against the victims. She is aware that there are threats of physical harm that have been issued by bodyguards who have placed a number on the head of the victims if they come forward. And there is a real threat of individuals being killed if they speak out against a particular celebrity with regard to attendance at these parties. Thus, already there are those individuals who will have engaged in nefarious acts at P Diddy's parties, thus making them complicit with P Diddy, who have not yet been named, but there is the potential for them to be named by these victims. Undoubtedly, numerous of these celebrities who have engaged in this similar behaviour will be narcissists themselves, and therefore are seeking to nullify the threat to control posed by victims speaking out by the issuing of threat. Threat is commonly used by narcissists, both lesser and mid-range. Lesser only tend to act on it if they're able to do so immediately. Mid-range often don't act on the threat, either preferring for somebody else to do it for them, or if that's not an option, they utilise the threat hanging over a person because that's where the real power is. Threats are commonly utilised as a form of manipulation by narcissists of the lesser and mid-range variety for the purposes of nullifying threats to control and maintaining control. And if you'd like to understand more about that, I'd encourage you to watch my video, The Narcissist and Threats. There's some discussion that then takes place about the vetting process and how that ought to be done. There's an individual called Ariel Mitchell Kidd, and she is a high-profile civil litigation attorney. She is representing one client in a case against P Diddy. Mitchell Kidd explains that she's aware of the attempted sale of what have become known as Diddy tapes. Apparently her client filed a police report at the time of the incident, but was afraid to put P Diddy's name on the report. Mitchell Kidd explains that at the time that her client made her escape from being assaulted by P Diddy, the victim ran down the street and a neighbour took her in and advised her to call the police. At the time, the victim was afraid to name P Diddy because he was the height of his career, and she felt that she wouldn't be believed. This is a common response from many victims of the abusive narcissist, particularly one which is powerful and high profile. They will be simply seen as somebody seeking a moment of fame, somebody seeking to obtain a payoff. And of course it isn't helped by the fact that such individuals do exist that make spurious claims against famous people for the purposes of trying to obtain compensation. But it is commonly the case that a genuine victim feels that they will not be listened to, that they will not be believed, because the perpetrator not only is powerful, wealthy, well known, but they may well operate a particular facade. Now, the facade is less applicable here in relation to P Diddy as a consequence of the world in which he moved and the image that he presented. Nevertheless, he did wield particular power and particular wealth, and therefore it would be understandable that a victim of his would feel that no one would believe her. Mitchell Kidd, the lawyer, continues to explain that in 2022, P Diddy's home was the location of 2 separate sexual assaults against 2 young ladies, which also involved Chris Brown. Mitchell Kidd explains that in 2021, she was personally raising the alarm that something was not right about behaviours by P Diddy and that reports of assaults at P Diddy's home should be investigated, but nobody wanted to believe her or listen to her, and that she had high-profile celebrities, including a celebrity chef and politicians, warning her that her life was in danger if she persisted with the claims against P Diddy. This is interesting, that even a high-profile attorney was not being listened to, and that high-profile celebrities were saying to her basically, shut up or your life will be in danger. That demonstrates the reach of these individuals. It wasn't clear who would be the individual that was putting her life in danger, whether it was P Diddy or people associated with him, or people that might be named by her who had attended these parties and had something to hide. Either way, once again, you see the use of threat and the extensive reach of P Diddy so that other celebrities are saying you need to keep your mouth shut because your life is in danger. The lawyer explains that more people are now coming forward because it's safe for them to come forward without any retribution, which of course does seem to contradict the earlier comment that was issued by Dr. Leslie Dobson that was explaining that people are still at risk. The lawyer is then asked about what her client says happened the night that she was involved with P Diddy. The lawyer explains that her client was with some friends when P Diddy called her, Hoover, assertion of control, and asked her if she could come over. She said okay, but she was with some friends. And then P Diddy arrived with his right-hand woman, Christina Coram, who apparently is another defendant in the case involving P Diddy. The allegation is that P Diddy and Coram were making jokes about sex trafficking the victim, and that if they take her to parties, how the men would enjoy her. She was then offered a drink, took one sip, and recognised that it was spiked as she started to feel woozy. The allegation is that then P Diddy penetrated her with an inanimate object, which of course is a sexual assault, and that another man penetrated her with his penis, whilst P Diddy was watching from the corner, pleasuring himself. If this allegation is correct, as explained by the lawyer, then this once again demonstrates a sense of entitlement, a lack of emotional empathy. It demonstrates the way that the individual is seen as an object that is there to be used by P Diddy, both in terms of the way that he penetrated her with an inanimate object, and also the way that he saw no problem in watching her being sexually assaulted by another man, which evidently aroused him. He received fuel as a consequence of the one that had been to put them together. The interview explains that this allegation by the lawyer's client predates by a number of years, the federal indictment that already exists against P Diddy. And it's noted that this victim's story is in line with what others have said also. The lawyer explained she's been representing other clients who've been involved in similar situations with P Diddy, and she was aware that this was a recurring theme with P Diddy. She states she was aware what P Diddy was and is and continues to be. Well, of course, what he was and is and continues to be is a narcissist, whereby, on the basis that these allegations are correct, he is engaged in repeated behaviours exhibiting a sense of entitlement, the objectification of victims, rudimentary manipulations of a sexual nature, complete absence of emotional empathy, or haughtiness in the way that he had conducted himself. The discussion then moves on to the spectre of child victims. Another clip is played from the press conference with the lawyer, which makes reference to an individual who was 9 years at the time. The discussion shifts back to the investigative entertainment reporter Alex West, who explained that the alleged grooming used on the children is for the purposes of fame and celebrity, which, as I mentioned earlier, is how often a child victim of a narcissist finds themselves not necessarily going along with it, but not reporting the behaviour that is meted out to them, because they think that they will lose the opportunity of fame, of stardom, of joining a particular team, etc. And whilst they don't like it and certainly don't want to do it, they're forced to go along with it because they don't want to lose their chance at fame. Another clip is played from the press conference making reference to an individual who was aged 15 years old, who was apparently flown to New York to attend one of P Diddy's parties. It would appear that there are 25 claims from minors, which is suggested cannot be ignored. And once again, it's stated that there were always rumours of these things going on in New York City at P Diddy's studio. And she raises the question, this is the founder and executive of Lynn's Warriors, she raises the question of where were all the adults? Where were all the people that knew about these things going on? She explains that there were reports made. Some people spoke to the FBI in the hospitals. Why did nothing happen with those reports? Where did those reports go? Who were the children? She explains she doesn't want it to be another situation like Epstein, where it just goes away. She wants the public to know what is happening in show business. And this, of course, is demonstrative, once again, of the power and reach of a narcissist like P Diddy. That it would appear that the allegations that were made many years ago simply went nowhere. Was this because he was able, through power, wealth and influence, to nullify the potential threat to control by causing people to disbelieve the victim, by pouring scorn on them, that the person it was reported to didn't take it seriously because they were concerned about getting into trouble themselves with P Diddy? Perhaps those things will be answered, but it is not uncommon at all for a narcissist, particularly one that is well known, famous and wealthy, to extend a reach to ensure that the nefarious behaviours that they engage in, even if they are reported, they're nullified and nothing more happens. There then follows discussion about the modus operandi that is used in relation to the victims. It's explained that essentially P Diddy puts on a show where he's the puppeteer and the victim becomes the puppet that has to then put on a show for P Diddy's entertainment. The psychologist explains that he enjoys these high levels of stimulation and risk, and he's someone who specialises in high-risk sexual violence, and that she regards him as one of the most dangerous people that she's ever seen in her career. She's asked about the claims of voyeurism and the fact that it's not always about him performing the act on the victim, but that he'd be watching somebody else with the victim. The psychologist suggests there is an element of sadism, that he's enjoying the pain. The fact is, this is demonstrative of his power and control, that he can bring those two people together, that he sits back, like the director, like the puppet master, and because he is the one that has caused it to happen. The reactions of both the individuals, the other person who's engaging in a sexual assault on a victim, and the victim himself, he receives double fuel. This is because he has brokered this deal. He has made it happen. He has brought them together. So the pleasure of that other perpetrator is fuel that P Diddy has generated. The misery, the upset, the pain, the hurt of the victim who is being assaulted is similar fuel for him. He's receiving both positive and negative fuel from secondary sources, one non-intimate, the other intimate. It's also suggested that as a consequence of this voyeurism, this is why videotapes were created. Now again, this proves to be problematic for the narcissist because as the assertion of power over the individual in videoing it, which can then be revisited at a later juncture, and new fuel can be drawn from it, the fact is, evidence is then being created of potentially a criminal act. This, again, is the collateral consequence. The lawyer is asked about this and explains that her client wasn't aware of any tapes being recorded of her incident because it didn't take place at P Diddy's home. The lawyer has seen stills of a tape purported to be at one of P Diddy's estates in Atlanta. The lawyer goes on explaining that she was told by an individual who wanted her to sell the 3 tapes that they had. She said that she didn't want to get involved because they could possibly be tapes of child pornography, and the lawyer wanted to ensure that there was no involvement in such sordid activity. According to TMZ, an anonymous male sex worker has met with agents to hand over what's known as a freak-off tape. The escort was reportedly flown from Atlanta to Miami to participate in the freak-off party, and he even detailed the drugs that P. Diddy used to ply the women with whom he had sex in the video. Apparently, the federal agents are still hunting for private medics who hooked up women to intravenous drips after the hours or days-long sex assaults. This is where the entire criminal enterprise alleged in the federal indictment comes in. You will see that there is this orchestration of bringing in a male sex worker to engage in having sex with these victims, that the victims are subjected to hours-long, days-long sexual assaults, which demonstrates a particular form of sadism from P. Diddy, but also then the use of intravenous drips, which in sense is done not because he cares about them or their well-being, quite clearly that is just not applicable, but is being done as part of the process of trying to cover up the activity that has taken place. There's a suggestion that there's a treasure trove of tapes if he recorded many of the freak-offs. The lawyer says she knows of one person who has 3 tapes, and they had invited her to Beverly Hills to look at those tapes, but she declined. The lawyer says she observed in the stills of one of the tapes, which was P. Diddy having sexual activity with another extremely high-profile individual and another individual. The whole discussion, which involves a lawyer, which involves an investigative entertainment reporter, forensic psychologist, revolves around the modus operandi, which seems to almost be trafficking, a factory of victims, multiple individuals that have been brought in and that have been sexually assaulted, which demonstrates the sadistic nature of P. Diddy, whereby, once again, these individuals are simply commodities that are there to be used and exploited. His absence of emotional empathy means that he has no sense of remorse, no sense of conscience in relation to how these people have been treated. And once again, discussions such as these, where the lawyers are now speaking out about the nature of the actions that he has engaged in against a variety of different people, explanations of what has gone on, the format and the modus operandi, demonstrates how the floodgates have certainly opened, and a lot of evidence is coming forward once again to support the allegations against P. Diddy and to underpin and emphasise once again the nature of this particular narcissist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.